Hi there, it's Mark Carosa, Regional Director of Multi-Funds, and welcome to the First Time Seller Series, a 10-lesson series presented by Mazon Partners. Each of these lessons can be watched on YouTube under the search Mazon, and that's spelled Moisson, Partners First Time Seller Series. Now today, I'm joined by Casey Corey, founder and president of Mazon Partners, and we're going to dig into lesson number 6. Should I merge, sell, or merge to sell? Now, before I get started, please share this video with your colleagues. Maybe they're considering selling their practice, and this video just might be what they need to hear. All right, now let's go ahead and get started. Casey, I'm really excited to dig into today's topic. I know this is an important one, and before we do, please tell us a little bit about Mazon Partners and why you decided to create the First Time Seller Series.
Mazon Partners is a 25-year-old mergers and acquisitions consulting firm. I guess actually 26 years now. We work nationally and help buyers and sellers come together on a regular basis, and also firms that are trying to grow through merging other firms in or advisors in. We created the First Time Buyer Series primarily because, Seller Series, primarily because, buyers can buy multiple times, and many of them do. I mean, you have serial buyers out there, and every time you do it, you get a little bit better at it. Sellers, on the other hand, usually only do it about, once. I mean, you only sell your business one time. There's some exceptions to that, but for the most part, it's once. And we wanted to level the playing field. We wanted to give knowledge to sellers that they could not get on their own, and so that when they are faced with making decisions towards the end of their career, then they'll be more prepared to do so.
And I imagine with you and the work that you do for both buyers and sellers, having those sellers as educated as they are can be extremely helpful in the overall process. So I totally understand the value of that.
It does.
So now today's topic, we're going to talk about whether a seller should merge, whether they should sell outright, or whether they should merge to sell. Now, why did you feel that this lesson was so important to include in the series?
Advisors have a lot of decisions as they build their books and their careers. Work-life balance, how to deal with clients, how to manage assets, the role that planning takes in their practice. Some people use it, some people don't. Those are all critical decisions to make. But the decisions that you make building your practice are different from those that you make in the later years of your practice as you think about, the waning years of your career. So, we'll touch on building a little bit here, but for the most part, our focus is on the options to consider when you look to retirement and monetizing your life's work. We look at why someone might choose to merge with another firm, why they may create an internal succession plan, and then finally why they might choose to sell to an external buyer outright.
So why don't we go ahead and get started with merging with another firm? And I'll ask, under what scenario might a seller consider the merge?
So there are a number of elements that I think you want to look at, or issues that you want to look at. Things like, for one thing, you want control of the process. You want some control of the process. Maybe not as much as if you were doing a succession plan, but certainly some control of the process. And that would include first timing. You want to work for a specific period of time before you retire, and you may want flexibility about when you leave and when you stay, and on what schedule you do that. You want to know what you're going to get for the book. You want to know what kind of price it is, or at least a formula that says when you're sitting at your desk, and you're trying to make a decision, you can kind of look at the formula and say, okay, this is what the book is worth today, and is this
Mhm.
the right time to do it? So when you merge with a firm under the right scenario, you should have a formula to do so, which will tell you that in the next 3 4 years, whatever it is, you they'll apply that formula to the characteristics of your book. You want a continuity plan. This is a real big one for me. I mean, advisors are much more likely to become disabled than die, even
Mhm.
especially older ones, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you want a continuity plan and in case you become disabled, but you can still come back. So surrounding yourself with a bigger firm will give you that opportunity for someone to step in and service the book. You want to be able to you want to be able to choose among successors. A larger firm will give you more advisors around you, of which you can make a choice of who might be the best fit for your clients, and you get to kind of test them out in a way over a period of time. You want to build before selling. If you want to build it up a little bit more before you sell it, the resources that a larger firm could give you might eliminate some wasted time that you would spend on things that are not revenue generating items or servicing clients. And people also get to a point in their career where really all they do want to do is service clients and maybe get a few more here and there. And a larger firm will take over compliance and all the other stuff that goes with managing an office, both back and middle office activities. You want expertise maybe that you don't have in order to get bigger or better, clients, more assets under management, more revenue. Maybe a CFP on staff, maybe legal, maybe something else. All those things can be contributory to someone's coming to you, almost like a family office in a way, where you can get more services for the larger clients, which not only makes them come to you, but stay with you over a period of time. And going back to what I said about a successor, when you get to a certain point in your career, and you're my age, 67, and you have clients that are in their 40s, well, they know you're not going to be around when they retire. So you need to start thinking about what's going to happen, are they going to continue to be your clients, or are they going to decide now that, now's the time to go? Maybe I should go find another advisor because he's not going to be here forever, and that kind of thing. So that guards against that attitude that those clients might have. Everything's a trade-off. You pay a little bit, or you trade a little bit of independence and a little net income to provide some of these opportunities I just mentioned, to make life and your career, a little bit better. Um, you have to make a decision on whether or not the trade-offs are worth it, which is obviously what you do when you look at different options. There are numerous affiliation models. Each one has its own characteristics. Some of the more prevalent ones or popular ones are that you can sell and stay, perhaps with an interest in the larger firm. So trade some of your revenue, some of your book for interest in the other firm. This is a model that you see with people like Creative Planning, Mercer, even some of the bigger, the other roll-ups or aggregators, if you will. And by the way, that is where we're seeing the highest multiples of EBITDA these days. It's become more about EBITDA than multiples of revenue now, because they're looking at net income, and the much higher numbers that we're seeing on EBITDA, really skyrocketing, are on these books where you join somebody, but you keep working for a while, because now they know they're going to get the clients. They know that there's a good chance that revenue will continue. You can work for a while with somebody and then sell, and that's another popular way to go. And in some cases, you can affiliate and never sell, but just rent resources from them. So they provide all these resources that help you build your book and so forth. You give them a little piece of, usually a part of your uh, basis points on your AUM, and in exchange they give you, all kinds of things. So those are really different ways to think about whether or not you might want to merge. But I would say that you would want some of the conditions or situations that I mentioned to be present in order to consider that option.
Okay. And before I ask you the next question, I'll just do a clarifier on the merge. So in a situation with the merge, you could find where the seller is paid 100% for the book. The book is now owned by the firm they've merged with, and then they continue to service those clients. As far as the clients know, that's still the advisor of record. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, you can do it
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
a
Okay.
relatively popular way to go. If you read about, like I said, Mercer, Creative Planning, a lot of these big roll-up firms, Focus, Hightower, all those firms, that is part of the model. They
I
either buy
see.
a piece of the firm, sometimes they'll buy a percentage of the firm. Dynasty buys like 20%, or they'll buy the entire firm. Like in creative, they you everybody becomes part of creative planning. They don't own their book anymore, so you sell the whole thing, and then you move
I see.
over. That's why these private equity firms are getting so prevalent among these larger firms, because PE firms love it, because this kind of revenue is dependable. It's mostly recurring
Yes.
revenue. So.
Yes. Okay. Well, so the next question that I was going to go to then is, let's talk about an internal succession plan. And so we've hit the merger, now an internal succession plan. Why would somebody choose to do that instead of merge?
Well, you heard me say a minute ago that the merger option gives you some control over timing and price and all these things. An internal succession plan gives you almost complete control of
Mm,
of the process. The timing of when you retire, when you want to do it, on what schedule, meaning that you can step back and work less, in stages. Someone within the firm assumes your roles as you and activities as you do that. The price you want for it, I mean, you have to find someone who's willing to pay that price as a successor. But the fact that you're going to still be around and help them take on the clients means that you've eliminated a lot of the risk for them, which typically means that you get a higher price for it. So
I
that
was just going to ask that, if from the merge the succession plan, if we see the price that the seller gets, that does go up with this type of strategy
Yeah, I mean
typically.
it does, because you also can control the timing of when you get paid, obviously,
Oh,
and how
oh,
much. And then, as I said, buyers care about two things generally. Buyers care about making sure that the cash flow is still going to be there
hmm
for the book that they're buying, or else they're wasting their money. And the second thing they care about is the transition rate. What is the rate
oh,
of clients and assets that are going to move to me? And so if you do that and you're doing it internally, well, their clients are not going anywhere. Nothing's changing really from the client experience. It's still, XYZ firm written on those statements and so forth like that. And so there is no real change to the clients. So that risk is not never eliminated, but it's certainly mitigated. And so quite often the buyer rather, will be willing to pay more for it, because they know they're going to get the money. They're going to get the cash flow.
and I
Um,
imagine that successor in many cases spends a few years or such, I mean, if they're a young junior, something like that, the clients know them well already. And I guess that, in itself really keeps the retention extremely high.
Yeah, I mean, incidentally, it's also a characteristic of the merger, model, but perhaps to a little lesser, lesser point, because you are changing to another firm when you
Yes,
merge.
yes.
But you're still the advisor. You're still there. You're still the people that, it's one of the reasons that when we buy a book outright or a business outright, we would love it if some of the employees stick around, because those are the people that have been servicing those clients quite often. And so the client
Mhm.
experience doesn't change much. But the more you can do that, the better off you are. And you're right. I mean, the terms take in all elements of the transaction, but the timing of the payments is also a big piece of it. To execute a succession plan, you really must either have someone that you feel could be your successor, a person that can take on, or you be willing to train somebody, or both, or be willing to go out and recruit or merge someone into your firm to be that
Mm.
successor, um, person who'll be appropriate, for your clients and the model that you've already have. We've been doing this kind of work for over 20 years, um, and I can tell you that it's difficult to get it right, but it's tricky, but if you are committed to the process, um, it is the best way for all parties, including the clients, in many ways. Um, it's best for the founder, obviously. It's best for the staff, because they still have a job, things of that nature. It's the nice thing about succession planning is that you can change it until you can't. And what I mean by
Oh,
that is
sure,
until
sure.
you're either mentally or physically unable to make a change, you can change it. And that's where it really becomes important. I say that even if you don't intend to adopt a succession plan, you should at least get a continuity plan. And they
Hmm.
usually call it
Hmm.
continuity and succession because a continuity part is for purposes of disability, long-term disability. The succession is in case for whatever reason you can't come back.
Hmm.
And so then it sort of becomes the default situation. Continuity plans for business interruption are required by the SEC for RIAs. And what would interrupt a business more than having the primary advisor become disabled? If there isn't
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
by the way, if you're with a broker dealer, you really want to read your agent's agreement to find out how they treat disability and death. I think you'll be surprised and probably not pleasantly. Um,
Well,
you know, you,
they always
and
assume the clients are theirs. So,
that's right. And
right.
unless you've got direction to them about what happens when you become disabled or die, um, your family is liable to get 10 cents on the dollar for what you pay. I used to do a lot of for broker dealer like speeches and so forth. And one of the first things we did was hold up the agent's agreement and ask them how many of the people in the room had actually read that part of it. And usually it was a pretty low percentage, usually approaching zero. And you just
That's
have
a
got to be aware of that. And a continuity plan and a succession plan will deal with that. It'll tell them what to do. Um, we installed a continuity plan. Mark, you've heard me talk about this before. A continuity plan in a firm in St. Louis a number of years ago. Continuity and succession. Um, Two guys were the successors. The owner subsequently became very ill. He was completely disabled for 6 months, or excuse me, 8 months. He was unable to come into the office. I mean, like he was coming in like once every 3 weeks for 20 minutes, and he just couldn't do it. And when it was all over, after 8 months, he did come back. And when he did come back, he came to see me and he said, "Look, had we not had the plan, the two people that ran the business, and instructions on what they were supposed to do when I was not there, then I would have lost the business." And this fellow had a number of employees, I think 20 something. And he also had, it was generating about $3 million in revenue. So if a guy like that would have lost his business, imagine what a solo practitioner that's doing $500,000 a year in revenue would do with
Right,
that business.
right.
I said earlier, the chances are more likely to be disabled. We know that the average advisor or the average person who's disabled for after their age 65, 50% of those people are disabled for 5 years or more.
Oh
And
my,
so if you're gonna have if you're gonna have a business, you really have to protect it. And we have seen ourselves how devastating it can be in the absence of and it might not be you. It could be your spouse. It could be somebody that you're a caregiver for. I got a wife that's a heart patient. I have another friend whose wife has Alzheimer's. Another one whose wife has um, Parkinson's disease. I mean, all those things require people being a caregiver, or can
hmm
require them to be one increasingly as time goes on, and that can affect your ability to work. So even if you have to go find an advisor who's not associated with you or your broker dealer, whatever, that you trust in your community, and say, look, if something happens to me, you service my clients. If something happens to you, I'll service yours. We'll, the revenue will split that depending on, what's going on. But make a plan and make a very simple agreement with them that automatically, and especially in a broker dealer, it tells them that that's what's going to happen. Then, that protects you in case something like that
Right,
happens.
right, right, right. And I do remember the story that you mentioned about the fella in St. Louis. And the thing that's amazing, I mean, at any point of our lives, anything can happen to us. But it's just interesting that the older we get, the more success we have in life, the ability that we have then to give back, to go down to, I think it was Central or South America to do some humanitarian project. And then, oh my goodness, come back. And now you potentially could have lost your business because of what you contracted. Those are the kind of things that the older we get, we put ourselves at that risk. And in most cases, it's simply because, financially we're able to help, and our hearts have grown to the point where we want to give back. And those are the circumstances that find yourself in. So my last question, in regards to this topic: who should sell outright and why?
So we see most sellers do so because they don't want to do any of the things I've been talking about before. They don't want to do an internal succession plan. They don't want to set up have to find a successor, or they don't want to go through the merge, process. They've just decided that, maybe they've had a bad experience. I have a client in North Carolina who has tried to find three successors. I mean, three times he's kind of gone through this process and it didn't work out. So, he's got kind of a bad taste in his mouth about it. And so sometimes that happens. People have a little bit of trouble with trust sometimes. I mean, all of us think we can do it better than the other guy. I'm that
Mm-hmm.
way too. Um, but if you don't have a successor, or you want to put, you don't want to put the work in to find one, or maybe you had that bad experience, that's one reason why people sell out. They don't want to make another move. So maybe they don't want to move to that firm where they merge. Maybe they don't want to move to a new BD because, some other guy with another broker dealer is going to buy the book from them. So they don't want to go through that again at 68 or 70 or whatever their age is. Um, they want to sell, keep the buyer, help the buyer with the transition generally,
Mhm.
and then keep their maybe even keep their hand in on some level. Most of the ones that we do where we're buying the book, the advisor keeps their hand in on some level, but they don't have a schedule. They don't have to come in if they don't want to, and they don't really have client responsibility past the transition period, other than once in a while they glad hand or give them a pat on the shoulder or whatever. And sometimes they bring a new client to the seller,
Mhm.
and they get a piece of the revenue when they do that. But for the most part, they're retired. They've decided that they're going to do something. They're going to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and relax.
Mhm.
Um, and they may have some post-retirement ideas about what they want to do. I certainly fall in that category. There are things I want to do after I pack it in. Um, Perhaps there are several advisors, like several advisors I've met lately, or as I said earlier, are caregivers for loved ones. Or maybe they're just tired. Maybe they're just tired of doing the job. You do it for 30 years or more, and sometimes it just, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. And obviously, we've had a lot of changes in our industry over the last decade, and especially the last 3 or 4 years, especially the last year. And a lot of people just don't even recognize the industry that they got started in, and they just don't want to do that anymore. And so they decide that they're going to do it. The one thing that we tell all of our clients that are buyers is that you cannot make someone sell. It's got to be their idea. They've got to, I mean, you may go to them with an offer to buy their business and give them a good price and all that, and that might encourage them, get them over the hump, so to speak, and be the catalyst of it. But the truth is, you cannot make them sell. It's got to be something they want to do. And a lot of people, put it off because they're just afraid. They're afraid they're going to be taken advantage of. They're going to be afraid they're not going to get enough money. I've heard people say, well, I give you 3 times revenue, and they go, well, what do I do in year 4? Because of the way that they've, lived off that cash cow of an industry or of a business that they have. Some will
Yes.
argue that you get the highest price from your book in an external sale. In some cases, that is in fact true. But as we discussed earlier, when it comes to succession, it kind of depends on the terms on whether or not you get the highest price. But it is true, however, that you generally get the biggest check when you do it externally,
Mhm.
because when you do it internally, it's typically a little bit at a time, a little chunk at a time, that kind of thing over a period. Whereas here, in an external sale, you usually get all your money within 1 or 3 years, 1, 2, 3 years, and in some cases the first year. It just depends on the
Mhm.
book and all the characteristics of that book. I read several years ago that 40% of advisors will never sell their practice.
Well, that's
I think
interesting.
it was a study that TD Ameritrade or
Mhm.
somebody did.
Mhm.
And they just let it dwindle away. They work a little less, clients start to leave because they're not getting serviced, or, they just, or maybe they realize this person's getting older and they need to go find somebody else, but they let it dwindle away. And, this is kind of a shame in my estimation,
Mhm.
because good planning would tell you that even though your income or some of your income will continue for a period of time, it is becoming less and less all the time, and you're still having to work for it a little bit. You're having to do
Mhm.
something. You have responsibilities. You still have compliance responsibilities. You still have a fiduciary responsibility to those clients. You can't completely leave that behind if you're just doing it a little bit at a time. So and as you know, it costs money for things like that too. Keeping
Mm-hmm.
your licenses going, paying for compliance, making sure you're straight with the SEC or the state RIA rules, all those things. You have to keep doing that kind of stuff. And so I getting something over 1 to 3 years and then investing it, and doing it correctly. And we are planners and advisors here, is quite often better than the dwindling revenue that you would get over some years as you kind of phase yourself out.
Mhm. I would imagine, and of course, you know the answer to this, so I'll ask you instead of relying on my imagination. The outright sale, I would think that would be the one that really would require help from consultants like Mazan Partners. It seems like that's where you say the seller has one chance to do it right. It seems like that one would be almost, a must. I would say almost a must. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I mean, we 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 represent buyers and sellers, not at the same time, obviously. Usually you can only serve one master. But we always say that we are advocates for a win-win scenario. And I know that sounds trite. I said something to somebody the other day that sounds trite, and he said, "Yeah, it does." But the truth is, we know that if all the parties that are part of this transaction are not pleased with that transaction, then the transition of clients and assets will not go well. You know, we
Right, which is
we have
key. That's the key point.
Yeah, and we have pretty high standards. I mean, we're looking for 97% of transition rate, and we typically get it. But you can't do that if both sides aren't enthusiastic about it. Your seller's going to be, or your buyer's going to be enthusiastic about it, but the seller has to be happy with it too, because otherwise, they're not going to feel good about going to their clients and saying, boy, I really wasn't thinking about selling, but then I met this guy, Mark, here, and I've done some due diligence on him, and he's a great guy, and you've trusted me for the last 20 years. Trust me one more time when I tell you he's the one to take you to the next step. Well, if Mark is not giving this person a good, a good deal, he or she is not going to feel real excited about saying what I just said, you know.
Right, right.
I talked to a guy here in Iowa about a year ago who had sold his book to another person, and I said, well, did you get a good deal? He said, no, it was a terrible deal. And I said, well, why'd you do it? Well, it was a terrible deal. And I said, well, how you handling that? And he goes, well, I'm telling my clients not to go with that guy. Well,
Oh, that's
I'm
bad.
sure that he's
That's bad.
sure that he's contractually required to tell him something, but I mean, they can say, yeah, you need to go with Mark, and then roll your eyes, and they know what you're saying. You don't have to come out and say it. So you have
Yeah,
to be
that's
enthusiastic
rough.
about it, and if you're not getting what you consider to be a fair shake, you're not going to feel that way. So we are advocates for the win-win simply because we know that in the absence of a win-win, we won't get that transition, which is not good for anybody, including the clients.
Right, 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 right. Well, Casey, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I've enjoyed it. And I know this has been an insightful lesson. As I sit here, it's insightful. But what I hope is that the advisors that listen to this will see how insightful this information is, how important it is for them as they go forward. And the next time we're together, lesson number 7, continuity and succession planning. You heard Casey say during this presentation how important that is. So please send your confidential questions to mark.carosa@multi-funds.com or C. Corey at mazanpartners.com. And until next time, here's wishing you and your clients health and prosperity.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Casey.